A small note. This episode was recorded a couple of months ago, so you will notice a few references that have become a bit dated. On the whole, though, I think you will find this a timely discussion on the ramifications and possible outcomes of nuclear proliferation. Don't forget to duck and cover.
I'll hold you close and kiss those radiation burns away.
Welcome once again to Syntax Error, your pretentious philosophical pedantic podcast ostensibly about video gaming and related topics therein. Warning, this podcast contains mature language, content, and spoilers. You have been warned.
Duck and cover for the third round of Brief History of End of Days, Technophobia. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer with Scott Thurlow.
Triple kill.
Stephen Armosi.
Back.
Beth Morgan.
Hello.
And Chris Morgan.
Do you want to play a game?
No, I do not.
Would you like to play a game? I fucked it up.
So we're going to be
nice game of
discussing
chess.
conventional warfare now and nuclear apocalypses.
The most classic of apocalypses.
So who would like to start off with things?
Alright, well, I'll mention the big one in the room, the elephant, if you will. I think we'll talk about Dr. Strangelove for a second, which may be the epitome of, like, perfect commentaries and use of nuclear apocalypses that humanity showed itself via those weapons.
I thought you were going to say Fallout right off the bat.
Which is also a good
That's
one.
a really obvious one.
Yep.
But, yeah, Fallout's... I'll mention Fallout then.
Good call.
Okay. Well, actually, this is something I wanted to say about the apocalypse, especially nuclear apocalypse. Throughout the Cold War, we really had this idea that the world could be destroyed with nuclear weapons. And I feel that fear has kind of diminished over the
Dissipated
years.
a bit.
It's become something like of yesteryear.
It's a secondary concern nowadays.
Well, I was going to say that the thing was, as somebody who did grow up in the Cold War, I was born in 1970. So, like in the 80s, where you had Brezhnev and you had Reagan spitballing each other, what you had was two major powers that if they went to war, you would have mutually assured destruction without question, even in a limited capacity. But now a limited nuclear war would fuck up the world.
Would decimate the Earth, yes.
Would destroy the... Yeah, exactly. But now that, despite Putin's little, threats, you don't have that dynamic anymore. You've got nuclear weapons, the threat of nuclear weapons in countries like Iran and India and Pakistan, but the real danger comes from terrorism. So instead of, so if the nuclear warfare would be resulted to isolated incidents with terrorism, but then you have not a lot of countries, but even the United States has still that pre 9/11 thing where it can't happen to me. So you don't see nuclear war in the way you did in the Cold War. In the Cold War, I feel like, with Fallout and so forth, they're kind of exercising that fear they had, where they're giving, as in a way as bleak as it is, Fallout is a very optimistic appraisal of a nuclear future.
But with the rise of Putin, whether you think he's a good guy or a bad guy, that thrust forward...
I think he's a badass guy.
Yes, a lot of people do. That thrusts forward the idea that nuclear war between America and Russia is not an impossibility anymore.
Mm-hmm. No.
He had moved recently some nuclear warheads up towards Eastern Europe. So you have that element to it. But again, I actually think that this recent Iran deal helped push the concept of nuclear war again into our minds. Mm-hmm. Where it might, it's something that you can't take lightly, something that shouldn't be a constant worry, but is something that you should seriously consider when dealing with nations, especially nuclear nations. And if you consider war lightly with them as something that, like how people felt World War I was before going into it, you don't consider the fact that it could escalate quickly to something severely destructive. Where we're all living in a fallout, killing rad roaches. And,
well, I can't wait for that, of course.
Of course, none of us can wait for that.
Clear, rad roaches are awesome, but just as a subtle
Delicious
point
too.
Yes, that's all true. But if you guys recall, at least in the Fallout canon, it wasn't with Russia, it was with China.
Yeah. That was actually a point I was going to bring up. I was going to bring up 3 movies, 2 of them are the same thing. It's really fascinating because you've got a cartoon from the 80s called When the Wind Blows, and it's aftermath of a nuclear war with an elderly couple who survived the Blitz in London. And it never occurred to them the difference in warfare. They kind of looked back on the Blitz as this romanticism where they'd go into their bunkers and blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And, it starts raining and the power's off and she goes, well, there's nothing more pure than rainwater. And you're talking, basically, the rainwater is the most radioactive thing.
Yeah.
And they basically die slowly. Actually, I'm going to bring up 4 movies. There's a movie called Testement that is... You don't see any bombs go off, nothing, but it's just the effects of like the radiation on somebody who's out of the blast zone. And lastly, I did not see the original, but I saw the remake of On the Beach with the Gregory Peck film in the 1960s. It was Russia and the United States, and the one that was made about 15 years ago with the actors on blocking, Brian Brown was in it. It was China versus the United States. But again, what happens in both films is a nuclear submarine goes down to Australia, and basically Australia is the last bastion of humanity to get the nuclear clouds. They're coming, and they hand out the blue pills. So if you want to get back into the Cold War mindset, the day after and Threads and stuff like that are terrifying, and games like Fallout are kind of romanticizing it. You want to see what real nuclear war would probably be for the average person. Watch one of those 4 movies.
Fair enough, but still, I think to bring it back slightly to encapsulate all of that, right? So originally, it was the superpowers were, as you laid out, Russia versus USA, right? They're basically on equal footing in the era of the Cold War. Let's say the late '60s to the late '80s, right? Until the time of the Berlin Wall. We'll say, right? We'll call that the end of the Cold War. But what's interesting to me is in Fallout, I'll bring it back to it. It's an alternate reality in which Russia was enfolded, or they lost their in the same way that it happened almost in reality. And then China takes its place, which, if you guys may agree with this, sort of is happening. People sort of agree right now. Yes, Russia's still a threat, but really China is the number one emerging. If it's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio, it's going to be us versus China, if you will.
But we're way more entangled with China's. Economy
That's
than we
true.
are with Russia.
Which is funny because 15 years ago when it was less so, and I'm going left field with this, is Firefly, that you've got the Chino-Sino or the Anglo-Sino alliance, where it's the United States and China have become
the only ones left and have become
this. Yeah.
But economic warfare is much more prominent nowadays than military
warfare.
Outright.
I agree with that. That's absolutely true. And I think to that point, that's why sort of the threat of nuclear warfare has been sort of relegated as a more background threat, because realistically that's probably not it might have been decades ago, 20 years ago, but nowadays it's more like that.
But I wanted to make a point about Fallout for a second, especially about the romanticizing of it. I never played the original 2, so I can't discuss where their mindset was.
I'll bring up some things, but you go on.
But in number 3, and especially in New Vegas, the nuclear war was just a setting.
That's true.
It dealt with 3 less so, but in New Vegas, it was it could have been almost any other type of situation, apocalyptic situation that occurred. There was nothing particular I feel necessary about it being a nuclear war for that world. Is the Mad Max world nuclear post-apocalyptic?
Yes.
So again, but it had that kind of. I guess the new Mad Max is even very true to that. That it's just a setting. It has nothing to do with. It's just out of habit almost of that Cold War. Where I'm interested now that the prominence of nuclear war, if we're going to be seeing that reappear as a topic in pop culture.
What I find interesting about Fallout, I'm going to make 2 points. Number one, with Fallout 3, and the reason the Fallout games are kind of romanticized is you've got the 1950s mentality. You can see it in the aesthetic. It's kind of like this. It's this retro advanced technology, but also with the rad roaches and the giant scorpions and so forth.
Ghouls.
And the ghouls. I mean, well, more so with the animals is that in the 1950s, giant spiders, giant mantis were all results. Godzilla was the result.
The whole ant one.
Yeah,
the
them.
giant ant that they did on.
But all these things, Godzilla, the 1954 movie is one of the greatest movies, and is a definitely more of an analogy. So it's definitely heads and tails above them, but them is also a very good movie. But it's that romanticism back to the 1950s where radiation wouldn't kill you; it would cause mutations. So
interesting mutations. If you
so this housefly that used to swat is now coming after you, and
it's ginormous. Sure.
But the thing I thought was interesting about the newest Fallout, the trailer for it, is it seemed to take nuclear war as like in Fallout 3, it's 200 years, and it was definitely a more connection to nuclear war than New Vegas was. But the trailers for it actually show before the war, so there is that whole horror of the end is coming. I mean, it was just such a really interesting tone for the trailer because on the one hand, you had the darkness of things like The Day After or Threads, and I'm really dating myself with all these references. But then again, you had that 1950s romanticism of the of what the post-apocalypse would be with like these mutated things. So the Fallout 4 trailer is but it's also, the trailer also brings about the terror of nuclear war. So I thought the trailer was the most engaging trailer I've seen for pretty much anything in the last, I don't know how long.
For both Fallout 3 and New Vegas, though, they did kind of bring home the fact that however long it's been since the nuclear war happened, still, if you go near like a water source,
it's still hugely radioactive. Yeah.
But as somebody who grew, I mean, you're not much. Well, you're younger than I am, but I'm not giving ages out. I'm only going to give mine out. When I saw the trailer for it, and I saw where they're listening to music, and it's a normal day, and then all of a sudden you get the air raid sirens going off. That to me brought back the fears of my childhood. So on the one hand, I know it's a Fallout game. I know the kind of world they're creating,
they're going for fiction, that kind of aesthetic,
but also there are elements of the trailer that terrified me because it brought me back to a childhood fear. My 4th grade teacher, Mrs. McMaster, said, "I feel sorry for you kids because
evil power
because she thought like Reagan did, because there's a quote."
Sure, what was the mindset of the times?
In I'm blurring. Generation Swine Part 2, where like you guys are going to be the generation that sees the nuclear apocalypse. And my 4th grade teacher's telling me this. It's something that Reagan would then echo a few years later.
Prepare for it, bitch.
That yeah.
According to the Republicans, she might still be right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
sure. We'll see. But all right, since we're on a Fallout kick, of course, like we always sort of are jizzing over Bethesda phrases, if you will. But I want to bring something up. One of the DLCs for New Vegas, probably my second favorite one, was called The Big Empty, or The Big Mountain, I believe. Old War Blues is the name of it, but it took place in the Big MT, which is it stood for Big Mountain. So they made like pretty much 2 good commentaries upon it, right? It was a scientific research center, which explained like it was a perfect fleshing out of the world because it explained why Cazadors exist, explained why Night Stalkers exist. They were doing like crazy scientific experiments, and they got loose, and like so it wasn't like. It was a reversal, like, oh, when you first encountered those creatures, you thought, like, oh, radiation, created these things. Like, no, humanity was already doing that anyways. Like, I thought it was a great reversal. So, like, yes, the Radscorps and all that, like, were, in fact, yes, created by the Fallout, if you will, like, the general radiation of the backstory. But also, humanity was still doing, like, fucked up, like, almost, not AI, but biological experiments.
Was it forced evolution virus?
Yes, and also that created supermutants, you're right. So I thought it was like sort of we were before the break we were talking about idiocracy a little bit. It's sort of like that. Like it stood for Big Mountain, but Big MT, like BMT was like stamped out everywhere. And as humanity devolved, if you will, they're like, oh, it's a big empty. like they thought nothing was there, but it was like a hidden scientific research facility. So a very good commentary on that.
The book I was referencing before was Generation Swine Part 2 by Hunter S. Thompson. I could not think of it at the time.
Shit, you're right. We should have all thought of that.
But the quote at the beginning is Reagan's like, this generation is the generation that'll probably see the apocalypse. And this is your president who's got, who can basically order a nuclear strike, saying this to you, and
But it goes back when the doomsday clock was started?
The Doomsday Clock was actually started
after World War II.
After World War II,
I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got pretty close to midnight.
Yeah, at the
during
Cuban
that
Missile
time,
Crisis.
though. Yeah. Oh, it was like 1 minute from midnight.
Look it up.
It just got moved up recently.
It got closer. The only time it was closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I looked this up, was during the Reagan-Brezhnev years. There was a certain point in time where we were actually closer than anybody would allow us to believe. And that's the kind of scary thing, is because the media is not going to... Nobody's going to release we're on the brink. You're going to find out it...
Although now the media talks about that. It just got moved up another minute recently. And
do you know how many minutes it is right now?
I think it's like 3 or 4 minutes from midnight right now. But I mean, it's never going to be more than 5. You know,
well, if it's midnight, you're fucked anyways.
Yeah.
The whole thing, I think the reason that the nuclear threat becomes something that people just don't care so much about is just the length of time it's been.
I agree with that.
Looming, and the whole Doomsday Clock, the fact that it's been at 5 minutes to midnight for what?
Right.
We've become desensitized to it.
Yeah, exactly.
It almost means nothing.
It loses its significance if there's nothing to compare it to. Like, all right, we've been 5 minutes to midnight for 50 years. Like, all right, what does that mean anymore? It becomes meaningless. I agree with that. But I'm actually glad we brought up the Cuban Missile Crisis, because that's like possibly, as we just said, the most realistic example of nuclear war. Imminent nuclear war.
Very close to nuclear war.
Everyone was like freaking out about. Yeah.
Well, my dad was telling me that when he was a kid, he was going to bed one night during this time, and he was sitting in bed looking out at the tree, outside because it was November, and he's like, "Is it all going to end?"
Yeah, that's the thing. In the same sense we were talking about earlier, like, you have no idea what it's like to be like, faced up against a saber-toothed tiger. You have no idea what it was like to like live in that era and like think that was a number one threat. Like, it could very well have been a possibility in your daily life.
No, this movie wasn't about nuclear threat, but the movie October Sky.
Yes, I remember seeing it. Yep.
When they first see the Russian satellite going across, and everyone comes out and they're like, "Oh no!" Yeah. And everyone's like terrified. Like, this is what the Russians can do. Now we are just in so much trouble. Yeah. Like, how threatening that was, and it's hard to see things from that perspective now. Exactly.
If you weren't like raised or like grown up with it, then as Chris said, you become desensitized to it, or like it's an unreal threat to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's fewer ways that are more
it's
awful to die than radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you go on.
All right, so I just looked up the Doomsday Clock. So in 1991, we were 17 minutes to midnight.
Is that the furthest it's ever been?
I don't know if it's the furthest, but it's the furthest I can find right now.
Okay.
So and it looks to be the furthest.
Mm-hmm.
As right now, we're 3 minutes to midnight.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give the quote on the reasons why. 2015. Unchecked climate change, global nuclear weapons modernizations, and outsized nuclear weapons arsenals pose extraordinary and undeniable threats to the continued existence of humanity. And world leaders have failed to act with the speed or on the scale required to protect citizens from potential catastrophe. These failures of political leadership endanger every person on Earth. Despite some modestly positive developments in the climate change arena, current efforts are entirely insufficient to prevent a catastrophic warming of Earth. Meanwhile, the United States and Russia have embarked on massive programs to modernize their nuclear triads, thereby undermining existing nuclear weapons treaties. The clock ticks now at just 3 minutes to midnight because international leaders are failing to perform their most important duty, ensuring and preserving the health and vitality of human civilization.
Doesn't surprise me, but
again, nuclear weapons are a subject we were talking about through the whole Technophobia series. Is that we built this arm race, and by the time Robert Oppenheimer and anybody working on the Manhattan Project really saw the scope of it, but nobody really realized what we had created until it was too late to stop it. Yeah. Sure. The machine was already running, and you couldn't slow it down by the time anybody realized.
Yeah, no, it was literally a world-changing, invention, if you will, and sure, it changed humanity's mindset. Like, beyond that point, we realized we literally had the capacity to destroy ourselves.
Yeah,
many times over. At that even.
Yeah,
and that changed. I think that changed all of humanity's zeitgeist. Like, once that point was crossed, then we realized, if we weren't apex predators at that point, we were then.
And I think we were talking about Dr. Strangelove before, and in 1964, 2 films were released that were like different sides of the same coin. One of them is Dr. Strangelove, the other one is Failsafe.
Yes.
And both of them are these are the exact same plot, but both of them illustrate everything really well. One's through absurdist parody, and one's through something that's very, very realistic and very. And both of them have a tension to them that's undeniable. I mean, there is that ingrained fear in both of them that this could be the end of humanity, and it's just the way they're dealt with. And they're both outstanding movies, and I highly recommend them to everybody to see.
I think this ties into like everything broadly. We're saying like we have the ability to destroy ourselves either via conventional weaponry, if you will, and or like AI beyond that. Regardless of like which direction you choose, we've invented the ability to destroy ourselves in some way.
Yeah,
that no other species ever accomplished that.
Right
on this planet.
Yeah, that we know of.
If you can call it an accomplishment.
Sure, yeah.
Certainly, it is some.
You said something. This is an early episode. I believe it's a paraphrase your quote, Steve-O. Something like it takes a lot of intelligence to figure out how to destroy ourselves.
Yeah, I mean it does, but that's.
But is that the logical end of of being the apex predator, being able to wipe ourselves, being able to destroy ourselves, if you will? Perhaps it
maybe,
is.
Maybe. Well, I mean, if that's the logical end of a competitive species,
You guys ever read? This is a graphic novel series. I think it has a very simple title. It's called not Mars, but right. What happens is they find a frozen species on Mars and realize the reason Mars is desolate is because a civilization existed there and evolved to be the apex predators and went to war with themselves and just fucked up the planet. That's why Mars is a desolate rust zone.
No, I don't know.
It was covered in water.
no,
It's quite good. I recommend it. Perhaps listeners will recognize what I'm talking about. But that was the plot, right? It's like
we'll put a note in.
It's present day. They go to Mars and dig down deep into the planet and find one preserved warrior from Mars. And they let him loose, and he destroys. He kills. He's a nuclear weapon of it. But they realize he's basically a human. They analyze his DNA. It's 99% matched to human DNA. That's odd. And they finally put together that the race on Mars, the apex of their civilization, was them destroying themselves, thus rendering Mars a lifeless planet. Billions of years before Earth even evolved. It's very good cyclical, and it's sort of like Manhattan Project E. But it's very well done, but it's something like that,
I won't issue any spoilers because I really want you to see it, but I can't press upon you enough. You've got to watch the reimagined Battlestar Galactica.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm getting to it.
Yeah, you really, because everything we've discussed is going to have,
It is incredible. It's really good.
But regardless,
you'd think the threat that we can destroy our own planet
would be enough.
Technology would be enough.
Keep us in line.
Not even that, but just the fact
to stop
make
us
find
stop and think.
a way to get off of our planet. At the very least, if we can't control ourselves on this planet, at least find an escape route.
Well, actually, there are, and NASA's doing a number of different things about isolating people for very long times with a small group of
I think
they did an 8-month study. They're doing a 12-month study soon to show what if we put people on a spaceship or what if we colonize them on a different planet, how to deal with the psychological factors of being. They even did it so that you could only have communications with the outside. It would take the same amount of time it would take to send a message and send it back. So they had 16 hours between sending a message and getting another one. So we are working steadily on progressing to, once we fuck up this world, we can move to another one and fuck it up.
Yeah, fuck it, man. We got more worlds. It's humanity's mindset. Seems like a good at the time. That makes you guys sort of a trick question. What is the greatest nuclear threat to our planet? Broadly. In very broad terms.
Country-wise, or...
I would say...
Physically wise.
The sun?
Yes. That's what I was going for.
Oh, okay.
Good answer. It's... What is it? It produces 10,000... Whatever it is. X magnitudes more than every nuclear warhead we have on Earth. Every second of the day.
I mentioned earlier on one of the other apocalypse... in the first one or second one, about the incremental destruction, or incremental versus catastrophic. And I feel that, yes, there is something, I guess, weirdly romantic about a grand...
It's a grandeur thing, yeah, sure.
But what's more likely is us using
a slow erosion,
that just slowly and destroy our
I agree
world.
With that.
I read a study that we're likely the sea level is going to rise regardless of what we do now, pretty heftily, enough to destroy a lot of the coastlines. And
slow erosion.
And that's even worse because, again, when you're dealing with such a definite end as nuclear weapons, I think there's that hesitance to it.
Yeah, no one really wants to push that button.
Yes, but that was what was brilliant about Dr. Strangelove, because it wasn't about us pushing. It was a madman who pushed the button, but because we had just set up a system and we were so ingrained with that system that's what destroyed us.
It was inescapable,
right? And in a sense, we set ourselves up with a system of like environmentally destructive capitalism that just keeps chugging along, and it's so hard to break that kind of slow erosion of our world.
I agree with that. So it's sort of like the divide is something like insidiousness versus like outright catastrophe, right? Like everyone thinks like, oh, if there's like one huge thing, that's the end. But you don't think about the small things that add up and add up. You know what I mean? Like the very small factors that over time are more destructive than like one catastrophic, like one single event, if you will.
Global attrition.
Like you mentioned earlier, the banality of evil.
Good fucking definition. Yeah.
Banality of our extinction.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That's fucking
banality
amazing.
of our extinction.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's very well said. But I agree with you, E. Like that's sort of like if I had to bet, I'd bet that like it's an attritional thing, not like an outright like from 0 to 100. No, it's like over time. Like more and more, but everyone's like, whatever, right? And as it keeps growing, like it becomes way more insidious.
We go out with a whimper
and not with a bang. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can pretty much deal with anything until you can't anymore. Well, and at that point, it's way too late to reverse.
I mean, look at the bees. I mean, 10 years ago,
not
Bill
the
Maher
bees,
not the bees,
not the bees.
No, not the bees.
10 years ago, Bill Maher did this thing where he was just like, "I'm going to talk about the bees," and everybody chuckled first. And he goes, "No, I'm serious." He went on about the disappearing bee population and basically like, if the bees die out, we have like less than 4 years before the food riots, and it's probably it is the beginning of the end.
It's death of 1,000 cuts, really. Yeah. And like you're like, oh, one cut doesn't matter, but like it adds up.
Yeah,
like, no stings. But no stings.
Oh. You son of a bitches. You sons of bitches. Yes, but no, I mean broadly, of course, that's what it's going to be like. That it's much harder to fight against like something that like kills you a very small percentage of the time versus one, either something that like, you can't see coming at all, so therefore cannot prevent. It's either a be all end all or like. Slowly giving in to 1% at a time until you have nothing left.
Well, what scares me in today's the religious right is that you've got these candidates pandering that I want to live the country by the Bible, and everybody thinks about Leviticus and the
which is 1984 style.
Yeah, but also you're thinking about global nuclear war is kind of like part of the biblical mythos. So you sit there and think, it's like, so wait, if we get you in office, are you going to start a nuclear war just so you and yours, because you think you and yours are going to get raptured? I mean, that goes through my mind. I mean, as a kid of the Cold War, when I see these, people say stuff like that. It's a legit
concern of their politics.
Yeah, because it's like Revelations. It's just like, so your faith is so strong that you'd be okay with nuclear war.
Let me give you, all right, just somewhat of a tangent, but it goes back to something we started off with. Let me give you an example of the offhandedness, like the ridiculousness of how the threat of nuclear annihilation has been relegated to the background. In college, Ian and Steve and I went to Rutgers. There was a place called Cluck You Chicken, right? They had various levels of like hot sauce. Do you guys remember what the hottest...
Nuclear, of course.
Global thermonuclear.
Oh, global thermonuclear. That's right.
That wasn't like essentially it was a joke. It was like that's how hot our sauce is. But if you think about it,
you get radiation poisoning.
Yeah, like if you think about it, like they're using like annihilation as a joke title for their fucking like ingredients.
Do you know what's funny? Because I go to Cluck You as well. And when I saw that, I immediately thought of war games because it's
let's
like
play a game. What game you want to play?
Global thermonuclear war.
Yes.
And the computer's like going, "Do you want to play tic-tac-toe or a game of chess?" So, but the funny thing about war games is that's ingrained.
Yeah, it became like a known term. Like it's supposed to be a threat, but it became like almost like
But how long can something remain a threat without actually happening?
Agreed. I think that's a very important question, Beth. Yes, like. What's the time gap on that in which no longer like you don't care about it anymore? You mean, or which it like becomes a background threat?
You can't possibly live your life being as scared.
It's time plus tragedy almost.
Yeah, but you can't treat it as something that's not serious because then, if we consider war with a nuclear power as something like, oh well, they're not going to use nuclear weapons. Nobody uses nuclear weapons, and that happens. Well, that's. That's betting it all on black.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
No, I agree, but but what I'm saying is no human being is going to, especially when they're living in relative comfort.
Maybe you just can't say that for sure, though.
I can say for sure, definitely, no human being is going to live their entire life in abject fear of the threat of nuclear war.
All right, sorry. I thought you were saying something else. Okay.
But we have an entire segment of society that lives in abject fear of an invisible man in the sky going to punish them if they do go against his rules.
Yes, but here's...
So
that's what they say, but I doubt that at all points
I don't want to get off on
afraid of that.
I don't want to get off such a tangent, but the fact is, that invisible man may exist. Nuclear warheads definitely exist.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
But it's human nature. I mean, we're also more afraid of dying in a plane crash than we are in a car crash, and the one is far more dangerous than the other.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. So we should just...
It's a lot scarier to die in
it's like a gambler's fallacy, almost.
But it's a lot less likely, is the point. Yeah. So it's not the rational
Its magnitude is less likely.
So I think what Beth is trying to say is we should randomly drop nukes every so often on...
just to remind us all how scary they are.
Yeah, just to keep it in the forefront and not the back burner.
You're a terrible person, Beth Morgan.
There should be a roulette of nuclear war nations. I'm just saying. I want to get to a point in which we can all choose which nuclear warhead. You can buy, it's almost like a crowdfunding thing, right? Dr. Strangelove style. You can buy and/or fund. This highway is funded by this nuclear bomb is funded by me, Scott Thurlow. I get to own it. I get to write it down if I want to.
Do you get to paint whatever you want?
Yes, I get to say whatever I want. I can say hi, John, or hi there, or whatever it said in Dr. Strangelove. Yeah, I can paint my own message on it.
Nice.
This stretch of 287 has been...
has been nuked by...
I got it for you guys. It's capitalism. It's vouch. If I buy a nuclear bomb, am I not allowed to say whatever I want on it and write it down in the way I wish?
I say okay.
That's the best.
I say you should do it sooner than...
How should we disarm all nations? Sell off as if it were a police auction. Sell off their nuclear armaments, and private citizens can buy them.
There is that concept.
Oh, awesome!
That way, it equalizes everybody.
But here's the thing: if not everyone, that concept of nuclear weapons, that if everyone can't have a nuclear weapon, should anyone have a nuclear weapon?
No, it's the all or nothing argument.
But why should one country have the determination? I think Iran actually made this argument a long time ago of why can't we have?
It becomes imbalance.
Everybody else, why does France or America have more?
Because arbitrary morality, of course.
Well, that's what India was saying in the 90s. This is everybody treats us like children. Why should we halt our
No, it's an escalation thing.
No, it's almost a status symbol now among countries that we have nuclear weapons.
You're right
we're
about
a major country now.
I'll give you guys
a big engagement ring.
It's the Batman thing. At the end of Batman Begins, he's he has a Joker card. They buy armor piercing rounds. We buy armor. It's it's escalation applied to humanity at large.
Actually, I was reading through quotes because I was trying to find the quote that I just referenced, but I couldn't. I saw one by Margaret Thatcher back in the day, who said that the world would be a much more dangerous place without nuclear weapons.
Margaret Thatcher was a crazy motherfucker.
But
she wasn't the most stable of politicians in retrospect, my friend.
But wait, Elie Wiesel made that after the day after. There in 1982 or 84, there was a movie called The Day After. It was a big thing happened on Sunday night. ABC, directed by Nicholas Meyer, starring Jason Robards. And
wow!
It was a
deep pull, Chris.
Listen,
this guy.
Well, no, I watched it, and the movie scared the shit out of me.
Right.
But afterwards, they had a panel on ABC, and Elie Wiesel was on there, and Carl Sagan was on there, and Elie Wiesel said, "In this Holocaust, we'll all be the Jews." Is basically what he said, and that's going back to what you're saying, because we're all in the same boat. So
we're all in this together. To quote Brazil.
In a sense, Margaret Thatcher wasn't wrong, and my uncle and I discussed this, that when you're talking nuclear weapons, no matter who uses them, everybody's going to lose. So, which is why we
mutually assured destruction.
Yeah,
that does theoretically stop.
Mad.
If you treat it seriously,
technically, it's a deterrent.
Yeah, it does stop conventional war from happening, and makes things like what Germany is doing to Greece right now, an economic warfare, much more.
It creates a stalemate militarily, which maybe that's a good thing, perhaps.
Or what?
But then you're right. It becomes a war of economics instead.
So, for instance, recently Iran or however many years ago, Iran started developing a nuclear weapon. So America just started dropping sanctions on it to the point when it basically used economic warfare to crumble until Iran said, look, we'll give up the nuclear program. And I mean, from what I've read, almost all of it's 10 years before, a straight 10 years before they can of gathering materials before they can make a bomb.
Yeah. Right.
So, again, it does it makes is economic warfare any better than conventional warfare, because it does hurt people and it hurts a lot more of that. Everyone in the country than, let's say, just a small segment that goes up to the war.
It's the ultimate zero-sum game, if you will. Like, nobody's going to win. In fact, it probably is a negative-sum game.
But in most cases, especially in cases like that, it only hurts one country instead of both of them.
That's definitely true. But it can be very negative.
Of course it's negative. Any kind of warfare is negative, yeah. Especially to the... I would say that hits specifically the civilians of those countries, as opposed to trying not to target civilians in a conventional war.
It hurts everyone equally in that sense.
Quote unquote, trying not to target civilians.
In quotes.
Yeah.
But, what if nuclear warheads, or if nuclear warfare can help stop, or the threat of nuclear warfare can help stop conventional warfare, what's the level of security a country, or a level of stability a country needs in order to truly possess a nuclear weapon?
To join that, club, if you will.
Pakistan isn't the most stable country in the world, but it manages to possess a nuclear arsenal.
Yeah.
Against India, which also has a nuclear arsenal, and it's a stabler government, but there's that antagonism right next door. And yet they've managed not to.
They have not launched nukes at each other. Go ahead.
Which is funny because they came very close in the 90s. I was thinking back something from my childhood back in the 70s. It was 1978, and this is scary because this is 14 years after Strangelove and Failsafe, but right before War Games. Because when we started getting the automated systems, we had some glitches in the late 70s where we were getting incoming targets, and nuclear war could have accidentally happened. Like War Games, 6 years later when I saw it,
is a viable scenario.
Hey, I saw ABC News. God, we watched a lot of ABC. I saw ABC News.
Well, there were only 3 channels.
Didn't have the internet.
Yeah, they only had. Well, they had 5, but 6. 7 if you include PBS.
But no one does
in the New York area. But I remember it's just hey, can these things accidentally cause a nuclear war? And I'm sitting here at 8 years old, and my 4th grade teacher telling me that we're probably going to see the end. And I'm sitting here going, we could accidentally start a nuclear war? I mean, nobody has to try. It's an error in programming, which goes back to Technophobia. Yeah. I mean, it's
error in human programming.
So when you ask what country, at what level can you say, yes, I'm able to possess nuclear weapons? The answer is no one. No one, because every system is fallible, and we've got decades old silos that are barely being maintained there.
They don't have a mine shaft.
So basically, we can any one of those things can go off, and our own weapons could bring us.
This explains so much about you, Chris. And 2, I agree with you. You should get rid of the nuclear weapons and just use chemical, biological, and fire bombs on people. That's so much more humane.
Let's go back to the good old days.
It's like with the Simpsons, where Lisa got rid of all the weapons in the world. It was the monkey. It was the clapping monkey, and the aliens came down. They beat him off with a nail on a board. And it's just they're gonna build a bigger.
They'll just make bigger nails on the bigger boards. Until the nail on the board that destroys themselves. Yeah, no, you're right. That's perfect commentary. That essentially is what nuclear weapons are. That was the joke they're going for. That's what they represent.
The biggest nail on the biggest board.
Yeah, if it's going to be one thing, it's going to be the other.
If politics is a chess game, politics plus military action, then it's the ultimate stalemate because no one is going to win, or the board will be wiped clean, and there'll be no game after that.
Yeah, but if you're saying it's like a chess piece, that means someone has 5 queens and the person has no queens.
Yeah.
So
by the way,
yes, that's
nukes.
True,
nukes are very scary, but what really scares the shit out of me is fucking biological weapons. Well, that is the most
style thing.
Oh my god. Just kicking, setting off one and accidentally kicking off this horrible plague. That would be
fair enough. But see,
That would be terrifying.
Agreed, but the only thing is interesting that, like, if humanity really wanted to, like, destroy itself, they would be, like, there would be, like, instead of nuclear warheads, there'd be, like, plague warheads, essentially, right?
What, smallpox buckets?
Yeah, how come there isn't that, right?
I was going to say there's not.
Right.
Well, there's a bunch of treaties. There's a bunch of treaties that say you can't use that.
Right, but it's arbitrary as shit. That's
well, yeah, because Iran and Iraq were shooting chemical weapons at each other.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I mean.
But chemical weapons are very scary too. Don't get me
what's
wrong.
What's more effective? Like, you want to, like, nuclear weapons? Yes, will destroy people, but also destroy the environment. Plagues and so forth, like, you know, an engineered cold. It's almost like the neutron bomb as well, which we haven't even discussed yet. Yeah, I'll discuss it briefly. You know, it will, like, it's a Dead Kennedy song. It kills people, but leaves buildings perfectly standing, like Repo Man style as well, right? So, in theory, that's way more of an effective
eyes melt, skin explodes, everybody dead.
But didn't you read that Obama purposefully released Ebola into the United States?
No.
To that one guy?
Well, to answer your question, I read that. Did I believe it? No. But
purposely gave it to that one guy. It worked really well. It was the worst.
All I'm saying is,
it was the worst plan of, like, setting.
As we wind down, if you think about it, like
a disease,
we'll do this as 1.7 or whatever version, but, like, engineered biological weapons would be, in theory, way more effective than just wiping out, like, everything.
Yes, that's how we conquered America against the Indians.
Yeah, well, accidentally, really.
I feel like that would be way less effective unless you had the cure for that.
Intentionally, yes.
There is an outstanding, if you want to talk about an anti-war movie, this Dawn of the Planet of the Apes that was released last year. Was it Dawn of the Planet of the Apes?
The second of the new ones?
Yeah, it's a tragically, devastatingly amazing movie. It was definitely one of the best of last year, and Fox News and MSN were running on both sides.
Converging consciousness, similar to AI.
Yeah, it was with the apes, but the thing was, the left and the right ran with the whole gun issue, but really it's a very good anti-war movie, but it discussed a lot of the things we want to talk, what we're talking about, not necessarily in terms of nuclear versus biological, but the mindset and how these things happen. It's more of a commentary on human conflict.
Humanity's escalation for war.
Although that was all about biological engineering is how it started.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to the Human Z rulers.
I, for one, welcome our chimpanzee overlords.
But it talks about war without destroying the environment. There's an excellent Star Trek, the original series episode called A Taste of Armageddon, where they stopped firing weapons at each other.
Can you tell us what episode number it was?
No, I cannot, smart ass. It's probably season 2. Maybe season 3.
If you had to guess.
What does Armageddon taste like?
I don't know. But what they did is they stopped firing weapons at each other.
You'll find out soon enough.
But the computers would randomly select an area each day, and those people in the area would basically say, oh, your street's been hit, off to the suicide booths. And that's how they fought war. And, again, there's bigger issues.
But no, it's a commentary taken to its logical extreme.
But yeah, it's like, let's not fuck up the rest of the world. Let's just, bomb each other. And, you're on your honor to go to the suicide booth.
So, we were speaking earlier about biological warfare. So next time we're going to talk about a little bit of biological warfare with the zombie viruses.
Nice.
Excellent.
It's
been a brief history of the end of days, Technophobia. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow.
Good night, and see you in the next technological apocalypse.
Cyril Mosi.
101001.
11011.
Thank you for completing that.
Beth Morgan.
Or answering me, I can't tell which.
And Christopher Morgan.
Good night, and good luck.
This has been Syntax Error. Thank you as always for listening, and we will see you next time.
Music by Stephen Armosi. Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
Syntax Error is part of a Lost Signals Productions. All rights reserved.